The small town of Brentwood, Ohio, was the kind of place where everyone believed secrets couldn't survive. The coffee shops buzzed with the same gossip, neighbors peeked from behind curtains, and the local newspaper always seemed to know more than it should. But one story, more shocking than anything Brentwood had seen in years, broke through the usual noise and left everyone restless. A police officer's wife, long divorced, had given birth to 5 children, and the truth behind it would shake the town to its core. Detective Mark Ralston had lived in Brentwood nearly all his life. People respected him. He was reliable, disciplined, and almost painfully dedicated to his job. His reputation as a tough but fair cop was something he carried like armor, though underneath it, his personal life had been crumbling for years. He had married Claire right after college. She had been his opposite, gentle, warm, the kind of woman who believed in birthday surprises, candlelit dinners, and building a life together brick by brick. For a while, it had worked. But over time, the cracks deepened. Mark's nights stretched later and later. His phone calls became shorter. His promises to make it up to her went unfulfilled. When Claire handed him divorce papers one rainy Friday night, he hadn't argued. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to fight for something he had already neglected into silence. She told him she wanted children, that she wanted someone present, not a man who only came home to sleep and leave again. He remembered the tears rolling down her face, the finality in her voice. He also remembered the crushing silence that filled the room after she walked away. 6 months later, the town woke up to news no one saw coming. Claire, now going by her maiden name Monroe again, had given birth, not to one baby, but to quintuplets. The newspaper headline used words like miracle and blessing, but to Mark, the story was something else entirely. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the front page, his ex-wife's photograph staring back at him. She was in a hospital bed, pale but smiling faintly, 5 tiny newborns swaddled in pastel blankets around her. She looked exhausted but strangely radiant, as though this was what she had always been waiting for. The whispers in town grew louder by the day. How could she have been pregnant during the divorce without Mark ever mentioning it? If they weren't his, then whose children were they? Some people claimed she must have secretly gone to a fertility clinic, desperate after years of wanting children. Others whispered that she had taken a lover long before the divorce. Theories piled up like leaves in the street, each one more suspicious than the last. Mark didn't respond to the gossip, but the questions ate away at him. Late at night, he found himself driving past the house that used to be his, parking down the block like a stranger spying on someone else's life. Through the curtains, he sometimes saw the faint glow of a lamp or heard the soft cry of an infant carried through the open window. His chest tightened every time. He didn't knock. He couldn't bring himself to. He just sat in silence, watching a life he wasn't part of anymore. But fate refused to let him stay away for long. A call came in one evening from Brentwood General Hospital about a disturbance in the maternity ward. A man had been caught sneaking into the wing where the quintuplets were kept. By the time Mark arrived, security had already detained him. The man was in his 40s, pale and twitchy, with hollow eyes that darted around the room. He claimed he was just curious, but when Mark searched him, he found Claire's address written on a slip of paper tucked into his wallet. The air grew thick as Mark questioned him. "Why were you trying to get near her children? Who sent you?" he demanded. The man refused to answer, his lips clamping shut, his eyes filled with something darker than fear. Mark had seen obsession before, and this was it. This wasn't curiosity. It was targeted. When Mark tried to check in on Claire after the incident, she refused to see him. The nurse relayed her message with a sharp edge. She didn't want visitors, especially not her ex-husband. The rejection stung, but more than that, it deepened his unease. Claire wasn't just shutting him out. She was protecting something fiercely. Maybe not just the children, but a secret tied to them. That night, alone in his apartment, Mark poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared at the ceiling. Every moment of their marriage replayed in his head, every conversation about children they never had, every time Claire's voice trembled when she asked if he'd ever be ready. Now she had 5 children, and he wasn't part of it. His hand tightened around the glass as one thought returned, over and over. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. A full pregnancy ran 9, which meant Claire was already pregnant before she walked away. Could they be his? The thought was both terrifying and electrifying. It meant everything he believed about the end of their marriage could be wrong. It also meant someone might have been after those children at the hospital for a reason far bigger than anyone knew. The next morning, Mark drove to her house again, this time determined not to hide. When Claire opened the door, she looked different than the woman in the newspaper photo. Her face was pale, her hair tied back in a messy knot, exhaustion written in every line of her expression. She held one of the babies against her shoulder, gently rocking it even as she stared at him with cold caution. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly, shifting her body to block the doorway. "I just need to know," Mark said, his voice rawer than he intended. "Are they mine?" Her eyes flickered. For a fraction of a second, he saw something, fear, guilt, or maybe something she couldn't hide. But then her face hardened. "They are mine," she said firmly. "That's all you need to know." She shut the door before he could speak again. Mark stood there for a long time, the echo of her words ringing in his ears. But her reaction had only confirmed what his instincts already told him. Something wasn't right. Someone had already tried to reach the children, and Claire was hiding more than she was willing to admit. That night, he made himself a promise. Whether or not Claire wanted him involved, he would find the truth. Because in Brentwood, secrets always surfaced. And this one was too big to stay buried. Mark woke the next morning with a weight pressing against his chest that no amount of coffee or whiskey could lighten. He couldn't get Claire's eyes out of his head, the way they had flickered when he asked the question she refused to answer. He had interrogated killers, liars, addicts, and thieves, and he could always read them. With Claire, he wasn't sure if it was guilt, fear, or something even deeper. At the station, his partner Detective Ryan Hayes noticed the change in him. Ryan was younger, brash, and quick with sarcasm, but he knew when Mark's silence meant trouble. "You've been off your game," Ryan muttered as they sat in their unmarked car outside a robbery scene. "What's going on?" Mark didn't answer. He didn't trust anyone with what he was thinking. Not yet. That night, he drove back to Claire's house again, parking down the block. He told himself it was for protection, not obsession. If someone had already tried sneaking into the hospital, what stopped them from coming to her home? Brentwood wasn't exactly a town of stalkers and crime syndicates, but something about the man at the hospital gnawed at him. People didn't carry around an address in their wallet without intent. The street was quiet. A warm summer wind rattled the leaves. Mark sat in the darkened car, staring at the glow of Claire's upstairs window. Then he noticed it, a shadow moving in her yard. Not Claire, taller, heavier, a figure trying to keep low as it approached the back of the house. Mark was out of the car in seconds, his gun drawn as instinct surged through him. "Police! Stop!" he barked. The figure bolted, crashing through the hedge of the back fence. Mark chased, his boots pounding against the grass, his breath quick and sharp. The suspect darted into the woods behind the neighborhood, disappearing into the shadows. By the time Mark reached the tree line, the man was gone. But what he left behind wasn't. Near the fence, in the dirt, was a crushed cigarette butt and a small photograph. Mark bent down, picking it up carefully. The picture was grainy, printed on cheap paper, but it was clear enough. It showed Claire standing outside a grocery store, holding a basket of food. And in the corner, barely visible, was one of the baby's car seats in her cart. Someone was watching her. When he knocked on Claire's door, she opened it only a crack, irritation etched into her face. "Mark, I told you. Someone was in your yard," he cut in. He held up the photograph. "This isn't a coincidence. They are following you." For a moment, her face went pale. But then she shook her head. "I don't want you involved." "You don't have a choice," Mark said, his voice lower, more desperate. "Whether you like it or not, I'm already involved." She started to shut the door again, but he caught it with his hand. Their eyes met, and for a second, the wall between them cracked. He could see the fear she tried to hide. She wanted to push him away, but something inside her wanted to let him in, too. "Just give me the truth, Claire," he whispered. "Are they mine?" Tears filled her eyes, and she turned away. "Go home, Mark." Then the door closed. He stood there in the night, fists clenched, knowing she wasn't going to tell him. Not yet, but her silence was as loud as any confession. The next days blurred with tension. Mark started digging, off the record. He pulled surveillance footage from the hospital the night the intruder was caught. The man had entered with fake credentials and confidence, like he'd been trained. That wasn't just obsession. That was organized. He ran the man's prints. His name was Harold Peters, a drifter with small-time charges in other states. Nothing that explained why he was targeting Claire. But Mark had learned one thing over his years as a detective. Small men often worked for bigger ones. Meanwhile, Brentwood's gossip mill grew crueler. At the diner, Mark overheard whispers about how Claire must have cheated on him, how maybe the babies weren't even legitimate, how a quiet teacher couldn't possibly raise 5 kids alone. He wanted to shut them up, but he had no right anymore. He was no longer her husband. One evening, unable to fight the pull any longer, he stopped by again. She answered the door, looking exhausted but softer this time. The babies cried faintly in the background. He expected her to slam the door again, but instead she hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the house felt familiar but foreign. The same furniture, the same photos on the wall, but the air was different. Diapers stacked on the counter, bottles on the table, the faint smell of baby powder everywhere. In the living room, 4 of the babies lay sleeping in bassinets while Claire rocked the 5th in her arms. Mark's throat tightened as he looked at them, tiny faces, impossibly fragile. Claire caught him staring. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't get attached." "They could be mine," he said, almost a whisper. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it this time. Instead, she sat down, adjusting the baby against her shoulder. "If they are, you wouldn't have been here anyway," she said bitterly. "Not during the pregnancy. Not for the appointments. Not for the nights I thought I couldn't breathe with the weight of it all. You chose the badge over me, Mark, and over them, if they're yours." The words cut deeper than he expected. "I didn't choose the badge over you," he said. "I thought I was doing it for us. For the life we wanted." Her laugh was soft, hollow. "Then why does it feel like I was always alone in that house?" He couldn't answer. The silence stretched until one of the babies stirred, letting out a soft cry. Claire stood to rock him, her body swaying gently, her eyes refusing to meet Mark's. He wanted to tell her everything, about the man at the hospital, about the shadow in her yard, about the photograph he still carried in his pocket. But he could see she was already at her limit. Pushing harder would only drive her further away. Still, as he left that night, he made another silent vow. If she wouldn't let him protect her willingly, he would do it from the shadows. The following week proved him right. Claire called the police after finding her car tires slashed in the driveway. The responding officers chalked it up to kids or a random act, but Mark knew better. He checked the scene himself and found another cigarette but near the fence. Same brand as before. The same person had been watching her. This was no coincidence. Someone wanted something from her, and they weren't going to stop. Mark realized then that the truth about the quintuplets wasn't just personal, it was dangerous. Someone out there thought they had a claim to those children. And if Claire wouldn't tell him why, he would have to uncover it himself. As he drove home, gripping the steering wheel tighter than ever, one thought stayed lodged in his mind. Claire wasn't just hiding the truth from him. She was hiding it from whoever was hunting her too. And if he didn't uncover it soon, those 5 innocent lives would be caught in the middle of something much darker. Mark couldn't sleep. For days, he had been circling the same questions in his mind, replaying every moment with Claire, every piece of evidence he had stumbled across. A stranger sneaking into the hospital, a shadow in her yard, tires slashed, photographs taken without her knowing. None of it was random. It all pointed to one thing. Someone wanted those children. He started digging deeper into Harold Peters, the man caught at the hospital. The man's background was scattered, but a pattern emerged. He had ties to a medical clinic in another state. A fertility clinic. Mark's pulse quickened as he connected the dots. If Claire had gone to a clinic after their separation, maybe she hadn't been with another man. Maybe she had chosen science, desperate to have the children he had denied her for years. But if that was true, why was someone following her now? Mark drove out to the clinic's listed address on his day off. The building was sterile, glass walls gleaming in the sunlight, receptionists in crisp uniforms smiling mechanically. He flashed his badge and asked about Harold Peters. The woman at the desk faltered, insisting she didn't know him. But Mark noticed the way her hand trembled as she shuffled papers, how her eyes flicked toward the back offices. He pressed harder, finally slipping out the photograph he had found near Claire's fence. This man was at my ex-wife's home. And this picture, this was taken by someone working with him. Don't tell me you don't know anything. The woman's smile broke. She whispered, "You need to leave. If they know you're asking questions, you'll be next." The words chilled him. He wanted to demand more, but before he could, two men in suits entered the lobby, their eyes locking on him. He recognized the look instantly, security, or worse. He walked out calmly, but the tension in his chest didn't ease until he was back in his car. That night, he went back to Claire's. She looked more exhausted than ever, her eyes red from lack of sleep. He told her what he had discovered, how the clinic might be involved. She broke down then. For the first time since their divorce, her guard shattered. "I didn't cheat on you," she said through tears. "I couldn't. Even when we were falling apart, I still loved you. But you wouldn't give me what I wanted most. A family. So after the papers were signed, I went to a clinic. I thought if I couldn't have children with you, I'd at least have them on my own." Mark's breath caught. "The quintuplets. They're not yours, Mark. Not biologically." Her voice cracked. "But I wanted them because I couldn't stop wanting what we never had." The truth hit him like a blade. They weren't his. Yet the ache in his chest didn't lessen when he looked at the babies sleeping nearby. Something deeper than blood tied him to them now, something he couldn't name. He wiped his face, fighting to stay composed. "Then why are they after you? Why would a fertility clinic send men after your children?" Claire's eyes lowered. "Because I didn't know. I didn't know the clinic wasn't clean. I thought it was legitimate. But what they are doing there, it's not just fertility treatments. It's experiments, gene manipulation, testing drugs, pushing science into places it doesn't belong. And my babies, they are proof it worked. That's why they want them back. To study them. To own them." Mark's stomach turned. Suddenly, the break-ins, the stalking, the intruder at the hospital all made sense. To the people behind the clinic, those quintuplets weren't children. They were property. Before he could speak, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the house. Someone was inside. Mark shoved Claire behind him, drawing his weapon as masked men stormed through the kitchen. The babies began to cry, their wails piercing the chaos. Mark fired a warning shot, but the men kept coming. One lunged at him, and they crashed into the dining table, shattering it into splinters. Another grabbed for Claire, yanking her arm. Mark fought like a man possessed. Every strike, every shot wasn't for himself. It was for her, for those babies. He managed to drop one intruder, then another, but not before one of the men hissed into his ear, "They are not yours. They'll never be yours." Rage burned through him as he struck the man down. By the time police sirens wailed in the distance, the intruders had fled. The house was wrecked, the front door splintered, the babies screaming in their bassinets. Mark and Claire stood amid the chaos, breathing hard, their eyes locked. "They'll be back," she whispered. "Then we make sure they don't get the chance." Mark replied, his voice steady. The investigation that followed cracked the whole case open. With Mark pushing the department and federal agencies involved, the fertility clinic secrets came to light. Dozens of children across the country had been born through illegal experiments. The quintuplets in Brentwood were the first set of 5 to survive. The clinic had been tracking them, planning to reclaim them once they were strong enough. The story exploded in the media. Claire became both a symbol of courage and controversy, a mother fighting for her children against forces that saw them as nothing more than test subjects. Mark, though not their biological father, stood at her side through every court hearing, every security detail, every late-night moment when fear crept back into the house. The town that once whispered about Claire with suspicion now whispered about Mark with something else, admiration. They had seen him risk everything for children who weren't even his. Months later, after the trials ended and the clinic's leaders were convicted, life in Brentwood quieted again. The house still bore scars of the night intruders broke in, but inside, there was laughter now. Mark often found himself sitting in the living room, one of the babies asleep against his chest, the others playing on the floor. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Claire sat beside him on the couch. Her hand brushed against his, tentative but lingering. They are not yours, she said softly. He looked at her, then at the 5 tiny faces he had come to love. Doesn't matter, he whispered. They are mine now. She leaned against him, her eyes closing for the first time in months without fear. And in that quiet moment, Mark realized something he had never admitted before. Sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes it's about the people you fight for, the ones you choose to protect no matter the cost. The town of Brentwood eventually moved on to new stories, new gossip. But in the white-fenced house on Maple Street, a family was finally whole again. A fractured love was given a second chance, and a secret that once threatened to destroy everything became the bond that tied them together forever.